A bit of a heads up. I will be discussing a few heavy topics, but I won't be going into too much detail. There will also be spoilers for Omori, so please click off and play the game if you don't want any of that. Basil, a classic. And if you're watching this video, you probably like Basil too. By all means, why wouldn't you? He loves his friends, he loves taking care of his flowers, just generally a very sweet and caring character. But for some reason, I've been noticing this trend, so to speak, where people just find him kind of annoying or dislike him in some way. Which is very surprising when you consider one big thing. Compared to all of the other characters from the friend group, Basil is the one we see the least. Yeah, I'd say even less than Mari. Unless you consider the dream world characters and the real world characters to be completely separate, but that's a completely different thing, and is a topic for a whole other video, honestly. So what are things that we know about Basil? And I mean really know. Aside from his interests such as taking care of flowers and reading, what about his relationships? Either with his family, his friends, or other. So I'm gonna talk about his relationships with each of his friends first, and perhaps talk about his family later. Because in my eyes, the main friend group's relationship with their families is surprisingly really important, despite how little we actually see of it. Actually, I think the most we really see of any of the characters' families is with Aubrey. Well, technically we see Kel's family too, but I mean like in a plot-relevant sense. Since, honestly, we need more Aubrey love. So, with little old Bagels over here, I think I'll start off with Hero, since in a way I feel like there's the least amount you could really say when it comes to these two. And really this isn't in any particular order. So yeah, let's start with Hero. I will say though that it does appear that they do get along just fine, at least when they were younger, and Hero has this sort of protectiveness over Basil, but you could argue that the entire friend group has that towards him. But I'll bring that up over time. I guess another thing you could possibly say is that perhaps Basil, in a similar way to Mari, has some kind of admiration for Hero, since Hero himself is generally portrayed as a very talented guy. Perhaps a good point of discussion is how he would react after the truth is revealed towards Basil. I know most people often portray how he would react towards Sunny, but I think how his attitude would change towards Basil could be interesting as well. I think that about wraps it up for Hero in this case.
Hey, is that my patty?
Yes, sir!
I asked for no pickles?
No pickles, ha ha ha!
No, you don't understand.
There's just a little bit more to say about his friendship with Kel than there was with Hero. Now, in a similar vein as his relationship with Sunny, Kel takes a very positive and supporting role for his friendship with Basil, which honestly is what this friend group needs the most. Someone positive, someone who is able to smile, and especially Basil needs someone like that. I also checked the wiki, and apparently it says that Basil takes the most photos of Kel out of anyone else in the friend group, which I did not know that. That's interesting, I guess. They do get along very well, and in one of the neutral endings where Basil commits unalive, that Kel legitimately cries for him, and we rarely, if ever, see this kind of emotional reaction from someone like Kel. He also reassures Basil that they're still friends, even after everything that's happened and all the time that's passed. Although Kel doesn't really know how to react or is very unsure of how to help Basil with his problems. Aside from this, they get along really well. In fact, in the real world, they got along even better than in comparison to all of the others around the friend group. Aubrey, well, speaking of which, she is the next character I'm going to discuss.
Did you two get paint all over me first dollar? We're so sorry. And then did you draw on it with crayon? Oh, I thought, maybe he'd buy it.
So, Aubrey and Basil, this is where it gets a little bit interesting because in the flashback, with Sunny, it kind of implies that Aubrey and Basil were friends even before, the friend group got together. Which, in all honesty, it kind of makes the fallout just that much sadder and more tragic. Because before Sunny, Kel, Hiro, Mari, likely they only had each other. And knowing how things end up with them both, with Aubrey and the hooligans bullying him relentlessly and tormenting him and calling him a creep, weirdo, anything under the sun, that just makes it sting a little bit more. Now, why exactly did she start bullying him? Because of the photo album. The photo album that contained all of their memories together. She saw all of it being scribbled out. Basil's reluctance to say it was Sunny, or possibly in denial that it was Sunny, led Aubrey to be very accusing towards him. Her rage just kind of skyrocketed at that point. She basically rejected him, and Basil, already with a very poor state of mental health at the time, just couldn't handle it. Now, please correct me if I'm wrong because I'm really not 100% sure about this, but I believe in one of the neutral endings, Aubrey ends up blaming herself for Basil's death, believing that feeling as though she pushed him to this. But in a usual playthrough of the game, she does end up inevitably apologizing to him because she realizes how horrible her actions have been. I don't think her treatment of Basil is really excusable, but if we go in thinking about how her state of mind was at the time, you could somewhat comprehend how she would get to this conclusion. She was frustrated, upset, and scared, alone. She kind of just lost herself. So overall, it's a pretty tragic fallout between two childhood friends. I know that's technically the entire premise of the game, but shh.
Locked in my Rari, 17 shots, I'm like, yeah, she's mine. Wonder when she'll be mine. She walked past like praise, rewind to see that as one more time. And I got this soda.
Mari, sweet, lovable Mari. Mari and Basil had a very close friendship, with Mari having been the one who gifted Basil the camera, as well as the two of them having a shared love of flowers. I honestly don't think Basil's actions during the incident really implies anything other than him just being panicked. In my opinion, and from what we have seen, Basil holds a strong admiration towards Mari, actually. He sees her as someone you should look up to, or at least as someone he looks up to. Sure, she wasn't perfect, but what? She was young, and nobody really is. But she was kind, and she cared about her friends. And clearly, they cared about her too. Unfortunately, I don't really think there's much to talk about outside of that. And this is generally due to how little we actually see of him in the game. Most of what we do see of him is in the dream world, and even then, it's very limited. This added with the fact that Mari is, well, dead. Unless you believe the whole paranormal theory, but maybe that's a discussion for a whole other video, honestly. Luckily, the next character I'm going to talk about has a lot more going on, considering how important their friendship is regarding the entirety of the story.
Rita, are you ready for your Valentine's gift?
No, but I'm ready for therapy.
Sunny! Yay! Everyone loves Sunny. Woohoo! There is a lot to talk about when it comes to these two. For one, it seems that they both consider each other best friends. And I believe in one of the photos in the photo album, Basil says that he always would end up venting to Sunny over basically anything, since, he's pretty easily stressed. But this comes at the cost of feeling like he's annoying Sunny or that he's a burden on him. But there really isn't anything that suggests or implies this. But we aren't really sure what Sunny is exactly thinking, as most of his thoughts aren't really shown, and more so just kind of implied with imagery and symbolism. But I do like starting up discussions, so I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you believe that Sunny might have been annoyed by this or might have been affected negatively in some way? Because later on in the game, we do have this implication, or not really implication, but this entire thing where in a way Sunny resents and hates Basil, even if it's subconscious. But I don't really think he hates Basil because of that, and it's more to do with the incident and what he represents. So I honestly don't think Sunny hates the person, he hates what it means, because Basil reminds him of what happened, of what he had done. And obviously, that hurts him. That hurts him mentally. So he's just gonna reject him. Reject Basil, I mean. He doesn't want him. He wants nothing. He avoids him. Or at least, he doesn't realize, or at least he probably doesn't realize it. But he hates Basil. Even if he doesn't really want to, he does. Because Basil represents that moment, that accident. Because they were there. They were both there. And they both went through it. And that's kind of what makes everything so tragic. Because it really was just an accident. Now, I know I kind of went on a tangent over Sunny, even though this is a video about Basil. But I do feel like, since the game is mostly through Sunny's perspective, it's a bit easier to analyze his feelings over Basil's. And it kind of puts a bit of emphasis on what their relationship was like, or at least how it was perceived through the lens of Sunny. Now, this video ended up being a lot longer than I was hoping for, and I didn't really end up talking about his family and such, so I'll most likely follow this up with another video in the future. So in the meantime, until that video, I want to start up a discussion. What do you think about Basil? What do you think about his relationships with the other characters? What do you think about his life in general, him as a character? Again, sorry for the abrupt ending and such, but I will follow this video up with talking about his family and how this just kind of affected him in the long run. But this video is way longer than I had planned. So hopefully I'll be able to talk more in the next one. See ya!